Right, welcome back. We're live and online with Cherie Morris. Please excuse my mispronunciation earlier. It's Cherie Morris. She's the divorce coach. And today we're going to talk about, should we stay? Should we go? What does divorce look like? You have a story, don't you, about your own?
Don't we all? If we have been divorced, there's definitely a story. And I think one of the most important things about the work I do, Christina, is that I really encourage all of us, including myself, not to get stuck in our story. And I think this applies to the contemplation of divorce because I really, although my website is Dear Divorce Coach, and many people would say, you're all about wanting people to divorce. In fact, it's not that at all. And I think when we connect, you know that about me, that really what I'm looking for is for people to have some certainty about the decision. And it's not an easy one. Obviously, you've had a lot of great speakers talk about issues that come up in marriage. How do we resolve those? How do we know whether we can make it work? The book I wrote is all about making that decision. But what I want to do with my couples when I work with them in a coaching capacity is figure out, where are they in this relationship? Can we use conflict de-escalation tools? They may have been to therapy. It may have been unsuccessful. Where are they getting stuck in their story? What are they hanging on to that's not working? So I work with very practical tools that I was not successful using in my own marriage, honestly. And the story was, one for the ages that any person who has been divorced might be able to relate to. We had 4 children, stressful jobs, in many ways, a very successful life, but also a very stressful one. And when you have unattended mental health issues, when you have conflict that escalates, which is sort of the secret shame, I think, of American society, especially, in affluent society, we don't want to talk about what can happen behind closed doors. And that was my own personal story. And it's what drove me to change from being a lawyer to being a coach and to supporting people wherever they are in this process. So I think my main mission and the reason we connected, Christina, is really, can we look at the conflict in our lives and figure out how to de-escalate it and accept our role? I really love that the last question asked before the break was about that. Do we need to own our own stuff? And as a conflict de-escalation specialist, I have a resounding answer, and that is yes. And thank you for asking. Once we all can own our own stuff, it's much easier to know that we play a role, right? And that we can own what we can own and then bring some tools to the process of de-escalating. In addition to the free gift I'm going to give people, which is just this first chapter of my book, I really want to focus a little because you said, let's get to the heart of this conflict. What can people do? And I think that there are some tools that we can use to do that. So I would love to talk a little bit about that. And I want to hear from you what you think people want to know, because I'm so eager to share, but obviously I want to speak about what your audience wants.
So thank you for that. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that you're not pro or con divorce. You just want to help people make the best decision for themselves and avoid the mistake of doing it from a place of anger or upset, which are temporary emotions, and really understand that it's not, I'm filling in the blank here. It's not going to get any easier with somebody else, right? Unless this is like truly the love is gone, this is not the person in your heart, like you are just, you got no you've healed everything, right? Like you've learned everything. There's no resentment. There's no anger left. There's nothing left here. And we're friends. I think that's time for divorce. And that's my opinion.
Yes. Yes. And I wanted to say one other thing, and then I want to answer that question, because one of the things you said earlier was, we want to show up for our children. And the reason I want people to be very careful and thoughtful about divorce is because of their children too. So yes, we have to take care of ourselves. We have to know our heart. We have to do what we can to have understanding with and for our spouse. But also, if we've made a decision to have children, we have a responsibility to these children. So as you said, if you make the decision, you're at the end of this love, relationship, you can be friends and you can co-parent and do that successfully and kindly, then more power to you. Because the thing that the research shows about divorce, and if people hear nothing else, I want them to hear this. It's not the actual divorce that hurts children. And you spoke to this in your own life, Christina, it's the conflict. You didn't feel safe. When children don't feel safe, that's when trauma occurs and that's when bad stuff happens. So that then when they replicate that in their own relationships, bad things continue to happen. It becomes a generational problem. So the goal from my perspective as a coach is to help people understand what it takes to figure out the work of the marriage. And then if they decide to divorce, if they are at the end of that road that you so beautifully described as one where they could just be friends, then maybe they can do it better and not have the conflict, because we don't want to expose the kids to conflict. So that's really what I'm about, is how do we figure out where we are, what our role is in this, what we can do to de-escalate. And I have a process that I teach people as part of my coaching practice. And I'd love to share that with people today, just so we have something that they can walk away with, in addition to that, part of my book, if that resonates with you.
So is the process for de-escalation, because that's what I'm really interested in talking about.
Yes.
It's something that my partner specifically asked for, which I thought, wow, that's pretty cool that that's what he's looking for, right?
Yes.
First of all, what is de-escalation? When should we be de-escalating? And then how do we do it?
Great question. So I want to make one point as a preface to all of this. We can never control anyone else, right? We know we can't control our children. If you have them, you can try, you can give them guidance and structure and all of that, but we can't, even when we want them to behave in certain ways, we can't always make that happen. We certainly can't do that with our spouse, but guess who we can control? Ourselves and our own behavior. So when I talk about de-escalation, I am talking about systemic de-escalation, but what role do you play? What role do I play? We each play it for ourselves, in my opinion, Christina. So what we have to do is bring a set of tools to everything that happens that raises within us some emotion. As you said, so many situations can bring emotion, and if left untethered, we might start shaming, blaming, fighting with the person next to us, the person we love the most, because we feel safest with them, and we're not going to show that to the rest of the world. So we start escalating with them. So if we can calm down that system, and when I say that system, I mean ourselves, then we will have a much better view and lens into what we can do the rest of the time, because we can't fix anybody else. And so much of our time, I think, especially as women, is spent trying to do just that. If only I can get him to, if only she would. But that stuff is wishful thinking. I'm talking about real tools to bring our own escalation, our own upset down. If we calm down the system, and it's a very simple process, and it's literally these 3 steps, and I use a little traffic light. And I don't know if this resonates with you. I'd be happy to share it in the chat with people. And let me talk about it a little. The reason I use the traffic light is I think we start up here in the red zone. We are
Hello, everybody. His free gift is going to help
for him as a child. Okay? In my
and
take care of ourselves. We have to know our heart. We have to do what we can to have understanding with and for our spouse. But also, if we've made a decision to have children, we have a responsibility to these children. So as you
we do it.
Great question. So I want to make one point as a preface to all of this. We can never control anyone else, right? We know we can't control. If only I can get him to, if only she would. But that stuff is wishful thinking. I'm talking about real tools to bring our own escalation, our own upset down, if we calm down the system, and it's a very simple process, and it's literally these 3 steps, and I use a little traffic light, and I don't know if this resonates with you. I'd be happy to share it in the chat with people, and let me talk about it a little. The reason I use the traffic light is I think we start up here in the red zone. We are hot, we are escalated. Maybe it's even a small trigger. Maybe our husband doesn't even know what he said. I mean, how often have we had that happen, right? So what we need to do from a coaching perspective is to go slower. Slow it down, slow down the interaction. Don't react immediately. Give yourself time to think about what happened. So as you go, as you slow down that interaction, you're going to lower your emotions. Now we're taking it down to the yellow light. So we've gone slower, we go lower, because as you slow things down, what happens is that heightened emotion starts to calm. And we're not talking big shifts here, but little shifts can make a big difference. And what happens then? We start to head toward the green light when we're containing ourselves. We're containing, and it doesn't mean you're not allowed to have emotions, but if we allow that a little space and time, even 90 seconds, research shows, we can actually process that emotion we're experiencing, still have it, allow it to be, and move on from it. So what have we been able to do? We're calming our system. So really, in my experience and practice, when I get my couples to work on, and individuals, the slower, lower, contain to calm, it's a great and practical and immediate tool we can use in any situation with our spouses, or really anyone in the world, to do better, to lower the level of conflict we bring and other people bring to us. Because again, we're not going to change anybody else. We can only take care of ourselves in these situations.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that speaks to you, but that's my system. And a great therapist shared her perspective on this and created the system, and it's just worked wonders with my clients.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Rachel says, thank you. She's been an ordained minister for 27 years and an attorney working in child abuse and neglect and occasionally divorce. And she's excited to hear about what we're talking about.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I bet she has a lot of stories. Yes.
Right. And Jody says she was ashamed to fail, so she stayed in a marriage. That's very common. You know, I think we spend so much time beating ourselves up for the choices we're making or the choices that we have made, when truly we're just doing the best that we can in that moment. And we're learning as we go along. And I feel like that's another myth that Hollywood gives us, is like, oh, you're supposed to have it all figured out on the first try. Like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you that you stayed? What's wrong with you that you left so quickly? What's wrong with you? Nothing's wrong. Like, we are all works in progress here. Nobody's got it all figured out. And if you haven't caught the thread yet, like, there is no like, do this, don't do that, right? It's slow down. It's own your shit. It's work through it. It's get support. It's talk through it. It's a process that we all, and even me, myself, like, I just want to rush to the good part. I'm just like, well, when do we get the fairy tale? I'm still hooked, man. Because when I was a kid, you know, and this is important for all of us to know as mothers, between about 0 and 8 years old, I believe it is, the human brain is just a sponge, like literally. It doesn't have judgment. Like, my kid doesn't make judgment calls right now, right? He's just like, oh, that's what you're doing? Oh, you're chewing? I'm going to chew. Oh, you're yelling? I'm going to yell. Like, literally, they're just sponging up all of the information and regurgitating it back out to us. So when I work with parents, they're like, oh my God, what's wrong with my kid? And I'm like, nothing's wrong with the kid, nothing's wrong with you, but let's talk about you. Because this kid learned everything he's doing from you or the TV that we're watching. And that was really my point, is that between the ages of 0 and 7, when Disney comes out, right, with all these fairy tales, we are just sponging that up. So we just have to give ourselves grace and gentleness as we're working to unwind our mind from all of this nonsense and protect our kids. That's my opinion.
I am in total agreement, and that's what I work with my clients to do every single day. And again, I think that these systems we can put in place to know, I mean, right, I have hanging in my office, everybody is probably doing the best they know how. They may not know better. Let's teach them how.
Yeah.
to do better. And that's what you're talking about as you work with people. Even if you didn't create all of your problems, you have a responsibility to try to solve them. Can you let it go? When you talk about whether it's forgiveness or a small trigger that comes up that your partner makes a mistake, you can sometimes just say, hey, they made a mistake. I'm not going to engage. I'm not going to let that get its hook in me. So these are and it takes practice. A habit is built over time. And again, I've heard your other speakers talk about this. It's about a month. So I noticed in the chat, someone asked, what else can we do about repairing relationships other than therapy? And I am an absolute advocate of coaching. And it is not therapy. Therapy is some of that digging deeper into the work of what was your mother's relationship like with you and your father. And that's important stuff. Or as you might say, Christina, important shit. I love it. That is. And there's other stuff like, how are we owning it? How are we going to change what we do in relation to it? Understanding, yes. But here's a practice. Here's a habit I'm going to ask you to implement every single time you have an interaction with your partner. And let's see if we can change that dynamic. And let's see how you can, and you said this so brilliantly, role model to your children to do better, because they are sponges. So if we can do that and implement that each and every day, these are the changes I can see. I have people who decide not to get a divorce because of it. I have people who decide they will get a divorce and co-parent successfully. So I've seen it work, and it does matter. And I'm here to say that we still culturally have shame around staying in bad marriages, have shame about leaving marriages too soon. We feel shame if we stay too long. As one of your attendees said, it's a terrible conundrum we put ourselves in. And what I love about what you're doing is let's talk about it. One of my failures in the community I lived in before my divorce was not feeling the space to be in a community of people. And I thought I had really good friends to actually be honest about what was really going on in the marriage. And it's not that I wanted to tell everybody, because we don't, but not having a group of people with whom you could share in a really honest way that marriage is hard work and it only gets harder.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I am going through so much sitting here with all of you. Would you guys chat with me? Am I the only one who's emotional? Am I the only one? I feel sad and angry and scared. I have so much coming up listening to all of this.
It's brilliant, Christina, and I love your honesty, and I feel it too. I've been here for the other speakers, and I think it's one of our greatest strengths is when we're in touch with those emotions. So I hope that, so many of the attendees are crying their eyes out and laughing a little and feeling, some escalation, because I think that that's what it takes to get us engaged in some of these practices.
Right? Yeah. It's like now there's more, like Jeff was saying earlier, there's more determination. That challenge makes us want to grow, right? So I am just a little not mentally all here, and I'm doing my best to stay present and to honor you, and to give you space to talk about. I'm just not got a question right now. I'm really overwhelmed with emotion.
Well, one of the things I think I want to share, because I think it's really effective as a coaching practice, and it really speaks to, I think, what you're experiencing right now, if I may make that suggestion and connection, is when I work with clients, I am available to them in the same way we connected. We connected by text. I want to be right there on this road with them. I want to be the most available person as they contemplate what are the most important decisions in their lives, honestly, for themselves, for their children, with their spouses, so that I am right there when let's say you texted me, Christina, and said, I'm just in the thick of it. I am in the shit. This is hard. And I would say, what exactly is going on? What steps can we take? So I think it's really important that we have that person that can do that work with us, that understands whatever system we're going to implement and holds us accountable to it, but also has great compassion. And I think it's really important that we have compassion for ourselves. And so many of us don't, right? We hold ourselves to these standards of perfection, of what someone down the street is doing, what, we think we should be. And sometimes it's based on nothing more than misunderstood norms we developed as children. So having that coaching work, or however your accountability works in your life, can be so impactful. And whether you decide to stay in that marriage and continue to struggle and make it work, or divorce with compassion and co-parent civilly and successfully, I want to be right there to help you with that. And I don't hold judgment for people who are in the thick of it. And I think that's one thing that needs to be said out loud more.
Say that again.
I don't hold judgment, and I hope that other people can say this. As a community of people, as a community of women, let's not have so much judgment about other people's choices, because no one knows what goes on in someone else's house.
Yeah.
What I think you are bringing to us today that's so beautiful is you're trying to help us support each other so that we know there's someone we can turn to when we're in the struggle. And it's so hard. As you shared, you're emotional right now. It's really hard when you have that emotion to know what to say, what's the right thing. It doesn't have to be the right thing. You just turn to your person and you say, I am suffering, help me here. And hopefully, ultimately, that can be your spouse because they are in it with you. And that's the kind of connection, in my opinion, real de-escalation can create. When we let go of some of these triggers, when we own our piece of it, then we create the deeper intimacy with our spouse.
Yep.
God, you're so wonderful. I love your emotion. I think it's wonderful that you're sharing this with all of us. You're amazing. And one of the things that we haven't addressed, and I want to say too about this process of when you decide to divorce, so many people are very naive about what it means. And one of the things that I talk about a lot with my clients is it's also not the fairy tale. In other words, some people think all their problems will be solved by getting a divorce, but guess what? And you said this earlier, Christina, we still are left with ourselves. So if we can't get out of our own way and be vulnerable now with ourselves and with our partner and with our community of people, it's not going to be solved by just getting out of your marriage. In fact, divorce brings lots of complications you never may have imagined. So if we can stay in the thick of it and keep fighting our way through, then let's do that. And if we can't, let's bring a dignity to the process. Because one of the things I see in my couples, and this is the other sort of shame, we like to think someone was at fault. There has to be the bad guy or the terrible woman. And instead, it's often just a mess, right? Both people hold responsibility. It takes two people to make a marriage successful. It takes two people to make a marriage fail. And that's not to suggest someone isn't trying harder or doing more of the right things, but who cares? We're both in it. So let's work on that and stay in the struggle and support people who are having a hard time.
Yeah. Thank you. Did we leave anything out? Is it time to talk about your gift?
Yes, I'm happy to share. So my book is right there behind me. Should I stay or should I go? And my free gift is the first chapter. And really, it's an opportunity to see some very practical ideas that if you're thinking about leaving your marriage, let's think about what that really looks like. And let's think about the ways in which you're being asked to step up, to lean in. It doesn't get easier. It gets harder, at least for a period of time. It may be the right thing. It may be the wrong thing. But please do the work of it before you make that decision. And they can read the first chapter. They can connect with me. I always talk to people before they become clients because I want to make sure I do this because I am passionate about what I do. I want to make sure that what they need is the work I can offer to them. And I want to be in the thick of it. So take a look at that. I'm happy to share the PDF of my Go Slower, Go Lower to Contain for Calm. I'd like everybody to hang that on the refrigerator, show it to your kids, show it to your spouse, use it yourself. If you don't see that, Christina, just let me know. I'll send it again.
I don't know how to, hang on.
Let me see if I can get it in the
I
chat.
think I've got it here.
Okay, great.
Right. So Cherie's got 2 free gifts for you. The first is
Yeah.
the first chapter of her book, Should I Stay or Should I Go? Definitely grab that. All you have to do is put your name and email address in the box on her page, and she'll send that to you automatically to your email. And then the second link is to that beautiful printout that you have to remind us to how to de-escalate, right? And there's a theme here today, is like talking while we're angry and upset, right? And it's weird because there's a difference, right? Like right now, I think would be a really good time for me to talk to my husband, because he's not used to seeing me vulnerable like this. Are you muted?
No, I'm
Oh, okay,
listening.
cool.
No, I'm
You're
good.
just this would be, and I'm not super angry, right? There's sadness, there's a little bit of anger, but I'm being just very in my emotion right now, and I could have a level-headed conversation as I speak through my emotions, versus earlier or last night when I was like, "Rawr," right? And that's where Sherry's de-escalation would have come in handy, right? Right. So we want to be, oh, do you see how this is kind of like an art, right? An art of vulnerability, an art of intimacy, an art of relationship, right? And just like in painting and drawing, there's no really right or wrong way to do it. I mean, if you're drawing off the page, right? If you're, swinging an axe at somebody, that might be considered the wrong way to do it. But like, right? Like this is an art, and all these free gifts and all these experts here are just help you to build your skill set and help you to build your comfort level around the discomfort that relationships are going to bring up, and to get off this hamster wheel of thinking that the next person, that the next time is going to be somehow easier, or you're finally going to get this fairy tale that we keep getting promised on television. It's just like, you make that, right? You let that happen. My kid is freaking out. I love you. I'm going to take a break.
Take care, Christina. Thank you so much. Talk soon.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let us know what your biggest takeaways from Sherry's interview have been. Type those into the post,